Hello, everyone. Today we'll be discussing evidence for and against secularization. Before I begin with this, I'd want you all to ensure that you have already covered the two prior lessons on this particular topic. The first one entailed different definitions on secularization, and the second one was about the secularization thesis, was on secularization thesis. Now, when we speak about evidence for and against secularization, we would actually be looking at some empirical evidence or research based evidence through which we try to figure out if secularization is taking place or is it not taking place. Now, remember, as I mentioned this earlier, secularization happens to be the most popular topic in terms of the CAIEs. Let me remind you all, if I simply have a look at the questions that we've had on secularization in the year 2021 and 2022, we've been questioned on this particular specific topic around 11 times. So without any further ado, let's begin. Evidence for and against secularization, or what evidence or what is it that we have or sociologists have figured out that helps us understand that secularization is taking place or it is not taking place. Most claims that secularization is occurring come from the European or American sociologists. Now, this particular point in itself, my dear, if you try scrutinizing this gives us a very incomplete picture. The ideas that we have about secularization, they're pretty incomplete. Incomplete in the sense that we cannot simply gather information or gather data or gather information again from researches that have been conducted by European or American sociologists, and then assume that we could apply the findings on the rest of the world as well. Let me quickly remind you of the theories that we have covered in the prior two lessons. If you remember, we had spoken about the definition on secularization put forward by Brian Wilson, by Steve Bruce, and by Jose Casanova in 1966, in 2002, and 2003, respectively. Remember, American or European mostly. Likewise, in the next lesson, the second lesson that we covered on this, we had initially spoken about we had initially spoken about Brian Wilson, followed by some classical sociologists or classical theorists such as Emile Durkheim, Karl Marx, Auguste Comte, Max Weber. Then we went on to discuss some contemporary sociologists that included Steve Bruce, that included Brian Wilson again, and that included Stark and Bainbridge, right? American sociologists. So the point that I'm trying to make over here is that most of the theories or most of the secularization theories that we keep on talking about or referring to, they're either European or American, and this provides us a very well, and this does not provide us with a very clear or a complete picture on on secularization. So American sociologists and reflect the views of those societies. This unit explores a wide range of empirical evidence, like I said, evidence based on different researches from around the world. The data are complex and they vary between and within geographical areas. For example, in the data from the World Value Survey. Now, before we begin with this, I'd want you all to know what this World Value Survey is. This World Value Survey, if I quickly give you an idea on this, this is an international research program that devotes to the scientific and academic study of social, political, economic, religious, and cultural values of people in the world. This is what we're interested in for now. Number two, when did this start? This was started in 1981. The second thing that I want you all to know. A few quick facts about the World Value Survey, as their website claims. They claim to be the largest non-commercial academic social survey program. They claim that it's organized in waves conducting every 5 years, and the recent wave, I believe wave 8, it is expected to cater to 2024 to 2026 data from this time period. So 120 countries, it represents 120 countries, that represents good about 94.5% of the world population. 150 plus national research team, time series data for 39 years from 1981 to 2020, respectively, over 600 indicators, over 30,000 publications based on the World Value Survey data, over 60,000 citations for World Value Survey in Google Scholar, over 800,000 data downloads per year. So you don't need to learn all of this. The reason why I'm showing you this is to let you know that the source from where this data is coming from, how valid is this source, or how credible is this source. But again, this is information that has been picked from their website. So as a sociology student, you could scrutinize it all you want. Now, taking this ahead, if we have a look from the data that we have from World Value Survey in the year 2000, this shows that 98% of the public in Indonesia said that religion was very important in their lives. However, on the other extreme, if we speak about China, only 3% of the population considered religion was very important. So this is a very significant difference. On one extreme, we have a country that claims that 98% of its public, they believe that religion plays an important role in their life. And on the other hand, we have another country that believes that that has a population that has the 3% population that considers religion to be important. Now, taking this ahead, there are other things that I want you all to keep in mind before we even begin as well. However, there are certain counter arguments that religious identities and religious beliefs have not declined as much as is widely assumed. So, in total contrast to what the secularization theorists claim, secularization theorists are the theorists who believe that secularization is taking place. In contrast to this, or as an antithesis to this, or as a counterclaim to this, right? There are many sociologists. We also have evidence that shows us that probably religion is not experiencing a decline as much as it is widely assumed, that traditional religions are not in decline, and that new forms of spiritual beliefs are also growing. So what we're talking about is that we have evidence that shows that secularization is taking place, and at the same time, we also have evidence that shows us that secularization is probably not taking place. And we also have evidence that shows us that traditional religions are probably not experiencing a decline. And at the same time, there are newer forms of spiritual beliefs that are growing, right? So on one end, we're talking about secularization taking place, religion experiencing a decline, and on the other end, we're talking about a growth in terms of new forms of spiritual beliefs, a growth in terms of new forms of spirituality. Remember that these issues relate to the key concept of identity. This unit that we're studying over here examines these competing arguments and evidence in relation to patterns of. Now, there are 4 different parameters that we'd be using over here to discuss evidence for and against secularization, right? Follow this with me, understand this with me. There are 4 different patterns, or there are 4 different parameters that we'd be using to discuss the issue that secularization is taking place and it is not taking place. And the 4 different parameters that I'm referring to over here are: number 1, religious participation; number 2, religious membership; number 3, religious affiliation. Now, there's a difference between religious membership and religious membership and religious affiliation, or belonging to a particular religion. And number 4, religious disagreement, right? So 4 different parameters. We'd be discussing all 4 of these parameters, and they are: number 1, religious participation; number 2, religious membership; number 3, religious affiliation; number 4, disengagement. Now, while discussing these, I would want to discuss this. Number 1, we talk about what religious participation is. Now, what a particular parameter is, right? Now, number 1, we'd initially talk about, we'd discuss what this particular parameter is. Or number 2, we talk about evidence in support of the idea that secularization is taking place. That is secularization is occurring, and evidence against the idea that secularization is occurring against secularization, right? So evidence in support of it, let me mark this in green, and evidence against it, let me mark this in red. So there are 4 different parameters that we'd be taking into account over here. Number 1, religious participation; number 2, religious membership; number 3, religious affiliation; number 4, religious disengagement. 4 different parameters, and all of these 4 different parameters, we'd further divide them into: number 1, I'd like to tell you about what I mean when we use the word religious participation, and then we talk about evidence for the idea, or in support of the idea that secularization is taking place. And then we talk about evidence or against the idea that secularization is not taking place, right? Now, taking this ahead, as we take this ahead and we move on, Before we even get into these four, right? Before we even start discussing these four, another tiny little thing that I'd want you all to keep a check on as well. Now, remember, we're discussing different parameters over here, right? And through these parameters, we would be measuring religion, or we'd be measuring secularization. Before we even step into this, again, as a sociology student, we should also be cautious that the way you measure religiosity, I repeat, the way you're measuring religiosity, it's going to affect the results you receive, right? So the parameter, the particular mechanism that you're using to measure religiosity is, of course, going to affect the results you receive. Now, in a major piece of research, the International Panel on Social Progress in 2017 investigates changing religious beliefs at a global level. The research led by Grace Davy et al. Shows how different ways of measuring religiosity reveal strikingly different results. So, according to Davy et al., if you use different ways to measure religiosity, you'd come across, or you'd eventually end up with different results. Getting started, to begin with this, or rather, before we even begin this, I'd want to discuss this tiny little chart that we have over here, this table, this picture. So if you have a look at this, okay, now before I proceed, do you need to learn this? Not exactly. You don't really need to learn this. Like I keep on saying, sociology is a subject. It's a beautiful subject. It enhances your understanding of the world. It makes you think more than a layman. It makes you think, and it makes you look at things in a different manner. So instead of just instead of merely holding opinions about secularization, about religiosity, let's delve into this a bit further. So if I talk about a comparison over here between New Zealand and Jordan, right? If I talk about a comparison between New Zealand and Jordan, we'd see that there are different parameters. As I'm using the word parameters over here, there are different parameters that are being used. For instance, in terms of religiosity being measured in terms of religious affiliation, right? In terms of worship attendance, in terms of salience of religion. Now, what does the word salience over here mean? Salience, or to help you connect to this in an easier manner, salient features, importance of religion, right? How important is religion for individuals or for people from New Zealand? And number four, the belief individuals hold in God. Number five, the practice of prayer. So based on these parameters, we have different data from New Zealand and from Jordan. Let's have a quick look and compare all of these. Now, in terms of affiliation, Acha, remember, red reflects Christianity over here, yellow reflects individuals who are not religious. So, if we talk in terms of self identification, people from New Zealand, 57% of these individuals saw themselves as being affiliated with Christianity. However, 35% of them claimed to be non-religious in terms of religious. However, if we talk about a comparison here, in Jordan, that is a Muslim country dominated by a Muslim population. In Jordan, there were around 97 of individuals who identified themselves as Muslims, and there were around 3% of individuals who identified themselves as Christians. The second parameter over here, that is worship attendance. In terms of worship attendance, 19% of these individuals said that they did attend their religious place. However, in Jordan, this is 57%. Look at the comparison here, right? Number three, in terms of salience, or in other words, the significance these individuals gave, these individuals or individuals from these particular countries gave to religion. Over here, in terms of salience, in New Zealand, this is 36%. In Jordan, it was seen 100%. See, that's a difference. That's a huge difference. In terms of another parameter, that is individuals who believed in God, the belief they had in God. In New Zealand, this was found to be 57%. In Jordan, this was found to be 100%. In terms of practice of prayer, in New Zealand, this was found to be 35%. In Jordan, this was found to be 91%. So this is what it is when I talk about different parameters being used, different ways through which you're measuring religiosity. Now, again, where does this data come from? This data, my dear, comes from the World's Value Survey, Wave 6. That is data from 2010 to 2014. Now, taking this ahead, remember when I had said we'd speak about religious participation first, and then we'd speak about religious membership, religious affiliation, and we'd speak about religious disengagement. If you haven't learned this as yet, do that right away. There are four different parameters that I would be taking you all ahead with. To begin with, we speak about religious participation, followed by religious membership, followed by religious affiliation, and followed by religious disengagement. Now, to begin with, when we speak about religious participation on a global level, numbers of those who regularly participate in religious service, they vary widely. We just saw that. We just had a look at the comparison between individuals from New Zealand and individuals or people from New Zealand and people from Jordan. So, on a global level, numbers of those who regularly participate in religious services vary widely. It is worth noting, as a sociology student, it's pretty important that we understand that there's a difference between religious participation and the belief individuals hold in that particular religion. Or, in other words, there's a possibility that someone could be actively participating in religious activities and still not be religious. Or, if I help you further on this, there's a possibility that there's someone who does attend the church regularly, but attends the church for social reasons and not for religious reasons. So it is worth noting that participation is not necessarily the same thing as believing. And many people choose to participate in religion for a range of reasons other than religious beliefs. For example, people may choose to participate for social reasons. What we pick over here is, now, if I talk about this particular paragraph, the first thing that I want you all to keep in mind is that we do not need to confuse participation with beliefs. One. Number two, a further addition to this, many individuals would probably be attending religious services or religious events because of social reasons, and not religious reasons. Therefore, the data may be neither reliable nor valid. Equally, participation in regular services is different to participating in major life events. Now, when we talk about religious participation, there are many people who do attend the church, but guess what? They attend these churches for weddings, right? To attend weddings. So if they're attending a church for a particular wedding, or if they're attending a church because someone they know has invited them, we wouldn't really count that as a religious participation. Yes, apparently they are visiting a religious place, but then the motive behind it is very different. So, equally, participation in regular services is different to participating in major life events such as weddings, christening, or funerals. Nonetheless, it is worth exploring levels of participation for comparative reasons. Data from the World Value Survey, again for the third time, which includes 60 nations, reveal that following interesting patterns of attendance of it, which reveals the following interesting patterns of attendance of religious organization. In other words, what I'm saying is, ahead, I just show you some data from that was published by the World Value Survey that includes a list of 60 nations, and we'd try to figure out religiosity through attendance of a religious organization. I repeat, religiosity, we're trying to measure religiosity by measuring the attendance towards a particular religious organization. Now, if we talk about this and compare, we see that a country such as Nigeria has around 89% of population that attends a place of worship, right? On the other hand, if we move on, I'd like to discuss India over here. India, 42% of population. I want to move on, and if you talk about France, this is 21%. If you talk about Russia, that's the least, that is 2%, right? So a comparison over here between Nigeria being 89% to Russia being 2%, right? Now, that's a huge difference. This data has been picked up from this time period, 1995 to 1997, and this is about religiosity being measured through church attendance. Now, this shows us that there's a huge difference when it comes to religiosity based on the country, the society, the culture, or the location of individuals or a particular country. Now, taking this a step further, let's talk about church attendance and let's talk about a decline in church attendance over here, and we would be we'd be discussing data from the UK and the USA, right? The UK and the USA. Remember when I said I'd use four different parameters? The first I had said was religious participation. I just spoke about what religious participation was. I showed you a chart that had data from the World Value Survey. And now I want to show you some evidence that would suggest that church attendance is declining or religious participation is declining. When I talk about religious participation declining, what I'm trying to hint you on is that we are about to talk about, we're about to discuss evidence that secularization is actually taking place, that religion is actually declining. Now, it is worth noting again that there's a lack of reliable data. There's a lack of reliable data on religious attendance for many parts of the world. Similarly, there's a lack of data on religious participation in the past as well. Now, there are many countries where data isn't really collected the way it should be. One. Number two, if you talk about a comparison, where if you talk about a decline in religiosity, we have to have a starting point. We have to have some data from the past that suggests that religion is actually experiencing a decline. So we since USA, both the USA and UK, they're considered to be the more developed parts of the world. We have the data available from here, and hence we just, I like to say, make do with this data. And this nonetheless would provide us with a good understanding, with a decent amount of understanding on what I'm trying to explain over here. So we're discussing all of this under the heading of religious participation. We're talking about religious participation being specific. We're talking about church attendance. Being further specific, we're talking about a decline in church attendance here. So some of the strongest evidence for the theory of secularization as applied to the UK and to a lesser degree to the USA is based on church attendance statistics. Now, why is it that we're using church attendance statistics? Because this particular this particular parameter again is used by many individuals when it comes to figuring out the extent to which religion is experiencing a decline, right? So we'd speak about UK and USA, as I said. Now, another important thing that we all need to note over here at this point is that USA is more it's more ethnically diverse as compared to the UK. Now, ethnic diversity, in other words, individuals from different individuals that reside in the UK. UK is a huge, it's a huge country, right? And there are individuals from different part of the world, from different ethnicities, from different religions that today call the USA their home. So it is important to note that the USA is more ethnically diverse than the UK. Although both countries have a majority of Christian-based religions, there's been an increase in alternative religions, partly as a result of high levels of immigration in recent years. So Christian-based religions, they hold monopoly. Nonetheless, at the same time, there's been an increase in alternative religions too. And partly a reason behind this could be high levels of immigration in the recent years. The earliest available survey statistics on church attendance in the UK originate from the 1851 census of religion. So data started being collected data started being collected initially in the 1851, and this was done through the census of religion. Now, if I'd like to show this entire thing to you through numbers, which I already have written down, which would make it easier for you. So if we talk about the data from England and Wales, we see that in 1851, 40% of the population claimed, 44% of the population attended church. This went down in 1901, went further down in 1950, 1980. It keeps on decreasing. 2015, this eventually was 5.4%. So if we are looking at data from here, we see a decline. We see a decline in terms of religious participation. We see a decline in terms of church attendance, right? So number two, if we speak about baptism again, so if we talk about a comparison between the data that was collected in the 1920s and 30s compared with the data that we have from 2001, compared with the data that we have from 2009, again, you see a very steep decline over here from 90% to around 20% in about 100 years of time. So this data, again, if taken at a face value, pretty much shows us that religion is experiencing a decline. This pretty much shows us that secularization is taking place. However, a frequently asked question is, sir, do I need to learn all of them? Do not learn all of them. This is to help you understand. Yes, if you're amongst the ones who wants to score good, yeah, learn, maybe you could learn this and then just compare it with this. I think that in itself should suffice. 1851 compared to 2015, that should be enough of that should be enough for your preparation for your CIs. So we're talking about church attendance rate, and this is collected from the census of religion. So collected by the census of religion. Now taking this ahead, if we talk about this further, according to the available statistics, there's been a fall in attendance in most churches in the UK between 1980 and 2015. However, there has been a rise in attendance at new churches, right? New churches. What do I mean when I talk about new churches? A range of new forms of recently formed Christian denominations. So, what we need to understand over here is that there's probably been a decrease in individuals attending traditional churches. At the same time, there's been an increase in terms of individuals I hope this helps here, right? So, however, there's been a rise in attendance at new churches, Orthodox churches, and Pentecostal churches, though not high enough to offset the falls in other institutions. Now, if you see, these two arrows that are made over here, they vary in terms of size. So probably religious participation has reduced more than this increase in terms of individuals participating in religious events and activities for the newer forms of church. In other words, there's been more of decrease and there's been less of an increase. So taking this ahead, this is what we are talking about. This shall help you understand better. So the red lines over here, the red lines that you see over here, they are from 1980. The blue lines over here, that's data from 2015. And if you have a quick little look at this, you'd see there's red more, 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 there's red less, there's red less, there's red less, there's red more, there's red more. So in most cases, religious participation or church attendance has declined. However, if we speak in terms of Orthodox churches, it has recently improved. See 2015 blue. Pentecostal churches, this has recently improved. So is the case with new churches, right? So this, and this have experienced an increase, and the rest from Anglican to Baptist to Catholic to Independent to Methodist to United Reforms or other churches, this has decreased. Again, do we need to learn this? Maybe a number or two, or you could just learn names. You could just say there's been, if you talk about a comparison between 1980s and 2015, new churches, Orthodox churches and Pentecostal churches have experienced an increase and the rest have experienced a decrease. Taking this ahead, in the USA, according to, remember we're discussing all of this under the heading of religious participation. Religious participation the idea is that religious participation is decreasing. The idea is that religious participation is decreasing, which shows us that religion in itself is experiencing a decline. So in the USA, according to the Pew Research Center, the percentage of Americans who say they seldom or never attend religious service aside from weddings and funerals has risen slightly in the past 10 years. 29% of American adults in 2018 say they seldom or never attend worship service, up to 25% in 2003. However, the proportion of people who say they attend services at least once a week has remained relatively steady. 37% says they attended at least weekly today, compared with 39 in 2008. However, Now you could, I mean, I've just discussed the data from UK in detail. If you want, you could uh uh you could I the data that we have from USA collected by the Pew Research Center. If you want, you could learn this too. It's again on your discretion. Remember, when we covering a particular topic, I have two main things in my mind. Number one, I believe when we study something, this increases our knowledge. And I am sure if you are listening to this carefully, this has increased the understanding, the knowledge that you had on religion, especially Christianity. And there are so many things that you might have come across that you had no clue, no idea about. That's one parameter helping us gain more knowledge. Number two, the purpose why you doing this would also be because you need to sit for your examination. So when you need to sit for your examination, it's pretty important you understand the paper structure. The current paper structure that we have expects us to answer a that is a single 35 mark evaluative essay question. So for an if the examiner is giving you a 35 marker evaluative essay question, it's pretty important that we do remind ourselves that the examiner cannot question us on tiny, toony little things. I mean, you can never get a question that demands you for any sort of specific data. So if you're learning these numbers, you're simply doing it to develop the point, or to use it as an evidence to you to show the examiner that your knowledge on this is pretty absolute and concrete, right? So since you can never be questioned directly on this according to the current format. So remember, this data that we're talking about, it usually relies on self-report measures, right? It usually relies on self-report measures. And when we speak about self-report measures over here, self-report measures, my dear, include questionnaires, and self-report measures include interviews. So be it an interview or a questionnaire, remember, when people say they're religious, they could probably be lying, right? So if they're saying they're religious, you cannot literally take what they're saying at face value. So however, people saying they usually attend services is not necessarily a truthful or valid measure of religiosity, as people may exaggerate how often they actually do attend a church. Now, we have spoken about evidence that has shown us that religious attendance is decreasing. Right now, we move on and we speak about about evidence that would show us that religious attendance is actually increasing. Remember, there were three different churches that I had shown you: the Pentecostal church. Here you go. The Pentecostal church, the Orthodox church, and the new churches. See, again over here, this is red is 1980, blue is 2015. If you have a closer look at this, you'd see red is lesser and the blue line is longer, right? So again, this again we through this, we do see that religious participation in some forms of for some forms of church has actually increased, these new denominations. So in the UK, there has been an increase in attendance at new denominations, for example, Pentecostal churches. However, this increase is not as significant as the number of those no longer attending the traditional religions. So like I said, if the decrease is this big and the increase is this small, yes, there's been an increase, but this increase doesn't really actually suffice. So these growing denominations may well reflect increased immigration. Now, immigration, my dear, plays a very crucial role over here. As we speak about immigration, we are talking about, now, like we discussed earlier, USA has a more ethnically diverse population, right? There are many people from different parts of the world that today call the USA their home. So when we talk about these individuals who have migrated from different parts of the world to the US, they have, or the UK, they have not only moved physically, along with them moving physically, they have also, I mean, when you're moving physically, you're also carrying your values, your culture, your religion. So that has to be taken into account as well. So an increased immigration, as immigrants tend to be more religious than non-immigrants. Now, at this point, I'd want you to go back and have a look at yes, we do have a video on that. The topic that covers this in detail is social groups and religiosity. And when we talk about social groups and religiosity, we had spoken religiosity in terms of social class, in terms of age, in terms of gender, as well as social religiosity in terms of ethnicity. So a video on that could help you understand this even better. So we all know, as sociology students, or from the syllabus or the content from the syllabus that we've covered, that individuals from the ethnic minority, they tend to be more religious as compared to non-immigrants or locals. Elsewhere, there's evidence that attendance patterns are changing as well. For example, in the USA, the pattern in the UK and the USA is that while there's a decline in traditional religions, there's a growth in new Christian forms of religion. So getting back to square one, we are discussing evidence for and against secularization. What I said right at the beginning was we would talk about we'd talk about some empirical evidence. There were four different parameters that I had said we would discuss. The first one was religious participation. The second one is religious membership. The third one is religious affiliation. And the fourth one is religious disengagement. Out of these four different factors, we're done with one, we left with three. So remember, while discussing a particular parameter, I would initially tell you what it is. Then we'd talk about evidence that supports the claim that secularization is taking place, or goes against the claim that secularization is taking place. So since we're done with religious participation, the next we have in line is membership of religious organization or religious membership. As I said, the second factor that we bring in under discussion over here is membership of religious organizations. But before we get started with understanding what membership of religious organizations is and use it to figure out if secularization is taking place or it is not taking place, it's pretty important that we understand what the difference is when we use the word religious membership and religious affiliation. So remember, religious membership was the second factor, religious affiliation was the third factor that we discussed. So religious membership, when we use the term religious membership, it is the way some participants of religion have joined their church. Now, if I call myself a Muslim, how as it I mean, if I call myself a Muslim, I'm a Muslim by birth, right? Now, the same way when you talk about individuals who are participants of any particular religion, how have they joined that particular religion is referred to as membership. However, when we use the term affiliation over here, what does the word affiliation mean? Affiliation, or in other words, a sense of belonging to a religious organization, a sense of belonging when an individual himself or herself identifies with a particular religion, right? So this is how you join. If I put it in a simple manner, membership is how you join. And this is when affiliation, you use the term affiliation to refer to the sense of belonging, right? I hope this helps. Now, the second factor that we bring in under discussion is membership of religious organizations. Religious membership numbers, although interesting, may be an unreliable source of information about religiosity. Now, membership of religious numbers, what this, understand this first, right? So membership of religious membership, if you talk about numbers, they might be very interesting, but at the same time, they might be an unreliable source of information about religiosity, because religious organizations have different requirements or criteria for religious membership. Now, for instance, I give you an example of Islam. Islam would have a different criteria for anyone to become a member of this particular religion. So would be the case with Hinduism. So would be the case with Christianity, so on and so forth, right? So membership should not be confused with affiliation. Here you go. This is what I was talking about, right? So membership should not be confused with affiliation, which is discussed later in the section. The general pattern, however, is that the number of members of traditional churches in both the UK and the USA is declining, right? Now, let's look for some evidence for this, right? Evidence that religious membership is declining in the UK. And if religious membership is declining, this again could be used in support of the idea that secularization is taking place, right? So, table 7.5.2 shows the number of church members and the number of denominations in the UK in 2012 and 2017. If we have a look at these numbers, from 2012 to 2017, we see that there's been, I mean, this is data from 2012, this is data from 2017. And if you talk about a comparison here, for the Roman Catholic Church, there's been a decrease. There's been a 12% decrease. For the Orthodox Church, there's been a 17% increase. For the Methodist, it's been a 15% decrease, right? So again, this uh these statistics that we have that show us religious membership, these statistics that we have that show us religious membership, this is again an evidence that secularization is taking place, right? Now, taking this ahead, evidence which suggests an increase in religious membership. So over here, we spoke about evidence that shows us that religion is declining. And at the same time, we also have evidence that shows us that religion is actually increasing through religious membership, bear this thing in mind. So religious participation is different from religious membership. Religious membership is different from religious affiliation, right? Now, while traditional Christianity is witnessing a decline in membership in the UK and other countries, other traditional religions as well as non-traditional religions are seen as seeing an increase both in the UK and beyond. So what we're talking about over here is that despite of the fact that traditional religions such as Christianity is of course an old and traditional religion. Traditional Christianity is experiencing a decline, but at the same time, other traditional religions, like could be Islam, could be Hinduism, they are witnessing an increase. At the same time, the non-traditional religions, different denominations or NRMs, they're experiencing an increase both in the UK and beyond. Now, taking this ahead, while discussing this, initially we'd speak about demographic changes. Now, for these demographic changes, okay, number one, it's pretty important that we know what do we actually mean when we're using the word demographic changes. So is religion actually experiencing a decline, or is religious membership actually experiencing a decline, or there could be any other factor? For instance, in this case, we talk about changes in the population. How is it that the birth rate, for instance, could increase religious membership or decrease religious membership? So if I talk about a comparison over here, to give you an example, if I say there are more Muslim children being born and there are less Christian children being born, don't you think this is eventually going to result in a decrease in religious membership for Christianity and an increase in religious membership for Muslims or for Islam? Right? I hope you understood this. Now, demographic changes. This increase in religious membership is not necessarily due to increased interest in the religion. Some suggest that the patterns are a reflection of population changes in particular parts of the world. For example, membership of Islam is growing at a rapid rate globally. According to the Pew Research Center 2017, globally, babies born to Muslims will begin to outnumber Christian births by 2035. At the same time, people with no religion are predicted to sharply decrease in the number of children they have based on current trends. So by 2055 to 2060, it is predicted that just 9% of all babies will be born to religiously unaffiliated women, while more than 70% will be born to either Muslim or Christian children or Christian parents. So again, this change in terms of religious membership does not necessarily reflect individuals losing their interest in religion. This could be due to demographic changes as well. This could be an example of this was what we just discussed, a difference in terms of birth rate, right? So if females who currently see themselves as religiously unaffiliated, right? If they are giving birth to less babies, and females who see themselves as Muslims or Christians, they give birth to more of children. Eventually, it is just a matter of time when there'd be an even stark difference in terms of religious membership. Now, taking this ahead, other religions that are growing as a result of increasing birth rate include Hinduism, which is the fastest growing religion in Pakistan and Saudi Arabia. So, taking this ahead, a growth in membership of Christian denominations, like we had discussed, even while traditional while traditional Christian church, right, traditional Christian church is experiencing a decline in terms of membership. However, there's been a growth witness in terms of Christian denominations. There's been a growth witness in terms of membership of these Christian denominations, right? So Christian, we're talking, do not get confused at this point, okay? So we're talking about traditional Christians and we're talking about Christian denominations or the new forms of Christianity. So a growth in membership of Christian denominations. In terms of new forms of religion, there has been a significant increase in denominations, particularly Christian denominations. For example, in places such as Nigeria, where rapid social change has led to people wishing to turn to a form of religion that they can relate to, right? Specifically, we're talking about Nigeria. There's a contemporary issue over here that we'd speak about as well. That's pretty interesting. There are amazing videos that are present on YouTube. You might as well YouTube it. Let me get over this first, and then I'll tell you what to do with that. So we're talking about a growth in membership of Christian denominations. Over here, we are giving an example of Nigeria, where rapid social change has led to people wishing to turn to a form of religion that they can relate to, that provides them with a sense of security, a sense of belonging in a time of uncertainty. See, if you talk about Nigeria, Nigeria is experiencing, Nigeria is not doing well. Nigeria is experiencing it's going through an economic turmoil. Nigeria is, the Nigerian government doesn't have much to offer to its citizens. In this case, if any particular form of religious denomination offers you a helping hand, there's a high chance that many individuals would want to take that option, right? So, in 1900, there were fewer than 1 million Pentecostal charismatics in the world, right? So we're talking about a comparison here in 1900, and in 2017 this increased to 669. So in 1900 there were less than 1 million. 2017 this increased to 669 million. By 2050, again a prediction, they will top 1 billion, the second Christian group to do so, behind Catholics. So it's a prediction, again based on the current pattern in terms of an increase in the membership of Pentecostals. It is predicted that it is just a matter of time. By 2015 they would top to 1 billion. Now, this is an interesting contemporary issue that you should read through. If you guys could YouTube redemption camps in Nigeria, and you would understand this super well. So in Nigeria, there's been a rapid social change and huge population growth. Christianity is on the rise in various forms. For example, in Lagos, redemption camp has been set up with 5,000 houses, roads, rubbish collection, police, supermarkets, banks, a fun fair, a post office, even a 25 megawatt power plant. So a country that is not economically doing well. If you talk about there being a redemption camp built, which provides you with the facilities that the government can't even provide you. People over here would have a reason. See, if you relate to this part, individuals, they can relate to this. They get that sense of security. They get that sense of belonging. And in a time of uncertainty, individuals get a sense of security. They feel, or they get a sense of belonging. That is why there's been an increase in religious membership for the Pentecostal Christian denomination. So, in fact, the line between church and the city is rapidly vanishing, and it is the church, not the local authorities, that is organizing the local community, both practically and spiritually. So, what we understand from this is, in countries like Nigeria, where there is a lot of uncertainty, where there's a lot of poverty, where there's a lot of unemployment, where there's a lack of facility that individuals have from the government, if a church provides you with all of these facilities, that could pretty much be a reason why many individuals would want to be a part of that church. So two down actually. The first one was religious participation. The second over here was religious membership. Number three, religious affiliation. Another way of measuring religiosity is to look at religious affiliation, or in other words, the sense of belonging, that you drive out of a religion. That is the number of people who identify themselves, as belonging to a particular religion. While there may be a number of reasons why people claim affiliation, such as to conform to social norms, the measure is still interesting as it highlights those who may claim or an affiliation but not attend religious services. So there are even people who identify themselves with a particular religion, but they do not very regularly, or they do not at all attend to religious services. So again, the same pattern. We spoke about religious affiliation. We'd speak about how this religious affiliation shows us how a decline in this religious affiliation would show us that secularization is taking place. Generally, the decline in religious affiliation reflects the patterns in religious attendance as seen in table 7.5.2. However, table 7.5.3 based on affiliation in the UK shows that as well as a significant increase in the proportion of people saying they had no religion. So there's been, if there are lesser people who have who are ready to identify themselves with a particular religion, of course, that could be used as an explanation as religion is experiencing a decline. Now, if you have a look at this from the so see this religious affiliation in the 2001 and 2011 census, in terms of percentage. In 2001, there were 14.8% of people who in the UK, in the England and Wales, who said they had no religion. However, in 2011, this rose to 25.1%. So there's been an increase in terms of the individuals who claim to not be religious or who deny or defy any sort of religious affiliation. However, if you have a look at this, for the ones who identify themselves as Christians, there's been reduction. For the ones who identify themselves as Muslims, there's been an increase. For others, there's been an increase. For the ones who did not state, that's pretty much the same. From 7.2, it was reduced to 7.1 in about 10 years of time. Taking this ahead, uh, yeah, there's been a significant fall in the percentage of those claiming an affiliation with Christian religions and an increase in the percentage of those saying they were Muslim or affiliated with other religions. This is what I'm talking about, this part here. Okay. Now, taking this ahead, it is also important to consider where the majority of people who are unaffiliated are located, right? So, according to the Pew Research Center in 2017, as of 2015, three-quarter of unaffiliated people live in Asia and the Pacific. This may be due to the fact that China, which is home to a significant proportion of the global population, has been governed under communist ideology, which does not encourage or even allow religious beliefs. So over here, you could link this to Marxism. Remember, according to Karl Marx, according to Karl Marx again, according to Karl Marx for the third time, religion is a product of the capitalist system. Karl Marx predicted when communism would take over capitalism, religion would automatically be, or what would automatically disappear. That's again a prediction by Karl Marx. So China, which is a home to a significant proportion of the global population, has been governed under the communist ideology, which does not encourage or allow any sort of religious belief. So we spoke about evidence that showed us that religious affiliation is declining. Now, on as a counter argument, we talk about evidence that shows us that religious affiliation is increasing. So Davy in 2002 argues that while there's evidence to suggest that affiliation to traditional Christianity is in decline in some parts of the world, such as the UK, it is thriving in other areas, particularly in the denominational forms, as we discussed earlier. Also, there are parts of Europe where affiliation to Christianity continues to remain high, such as Poland and Republic of Ireland. So we spoke about religious participation in detail. We went on, quickly wrapped up religious membership. We went on and we spoke about religious affiliation. And the last one over here is the last one for this lesson, is again religious disengagement. Now, what does the word disengagement mean? Now, this idea of religious disengagement, this could be linked to uh, structural differentiation, the idea of structural differentiation. Or what does structural differentiation at this point mean in this context? There was a time when religion had its very strong role to play in terms of educating individuals, in terms of providing them health related facilities, in terms of their welfare, or even for the matter of fact, in terms of in terms of the judiciary, right? So slowly and gradually you are disengaging religion. Slowly and gradually religion is being disengaged, or it is considered to be a separate entity, and the involvement that religion once used to have in terms of other societal affairs is reducing, right? So far we have explored measures of religiosity such as religious participation, religious membership, and religious affiliation. However, some theorists argue that it is the changing role of religion in society. So we're talking about the changing role of religion in society, which is also a key indicator of the significance of religion in society. From this point of view, individual beliefs are less important than the declining social significance. Now, again, if you have a look at the past paper questions, you have certain questions that have specifically mentioned the social significance of religion, and this is when this part actually plays the major role there, right? So changing role, yeah, where was I? From this point of view, individual beliefs are less important than the declining social significance of religion and shaping other aspects of society. Disengagement involves the withdrawal of the church from wider society. As I explained, when you talk about the word disengagement over here in this context, sorry, disengagement refers to the withdrawal of the church from the wider society as a result of its declining influence on other institutions, particularly the politics and law. For example, there's less creation of laws based on religious ideas for many parts of the world. This links to the key concept of socialization. If religious disengagement is occurring, people are likely to receive a less religious upbringing and therefore less likely to develop a religious identity. Look at the connection over here, right? So if the if various aspects of the society are disengaged from religion today, that would eventually result in individuals being brought up or socialized in a manner that has less of religion's involvement in their life, or religious salience, in other words, would decrease, which would again develop into we could say a non-religious identity, them holding a non-religious identity. So according to the Pew Research Center in 2017, more than 20% of countries have an official state religion, with the majority of these being Muslim states. And a further 20% of countries identify a preferred or favored religion. So countries some countries have an official state religion. There are other countries that show a preferred or favored religion. A small majority, that is 53% of countries, have no official or preferred religion. So the third category over here. And 10 countries are hostile towards religion, the fourth category over here. Let me just mark them down so that it gets easier for you. So there are countries that have an official state religion. There are countries that show their preference towards a particular religion. There are countries that declare themselves to not officially hold or have any particular religion. Now, the fourth category, there are some countries that show hostility towards religions, right? So most of the 43 countries with state religions are in the Middle East and the North Africa, with a cluster in Northern Europe. Islam is the official religion in 27 countries in Asia and sub-Saharan Africa, as well as North Africa and the Middle East. 13 countries, including 9 in Europe, are officially Christian. Two, Bhutan and Cambodia, have Buddhism as a state religion, and one, Israel, is officially a Jewish state. No country has Hinduism as its state religion. In some cases, the state religion is simply limited to playing a part in state ceremonies, but in other cases, the role of religion is significant in shaping the ideologies and policies. In addition, countries with established religious affiliation tend to strictly regulate religious practice, including placing restrictions on bans on minority religious groups as well. So countries like Saudi Arabia, formerly countries like Iran, countries like Israel, countries like Pakistan, we could say, they could all be used as an example over here. Taking this ahead, let's talk about evidence that religious disengagement is occurring, and then we very quickly talk about evidence that religious disengagement is not occurring. So it's the same pattern that we followed through and through. I have broken this entire topic, that happens to be one of my favorite topics, into different parts. The first part, the first lesson, I tried explaining different definitions of religion. Then we went on and we spoke. I think I spent an hour, yeah, more or less an hour, yeah, plus minus an hour to explain religious the secularization thesis. Now we're talking about evidence for and evidence against secularization. So evidence that religious disengagement is occurring. David Martin in 1969 argues that in the UK, compared with the Middle Age, the UK today, that is the 21st century, compared with the UK back in the Middle Age, between the 13th to the 15th century, the power, wealth, and prestige of established church in Britain has declined dramatically. During the Middle Ages, the church carried authority and in many ways took the role that the state or the government takes today. Steve Bruce in 1995 agrees that the Church of England has lost power as it has become more distant from the British state. So David Martin, Steve Bruce, pretty much on the same line. They both believe that there is religious disengagement that is occurring, which again is an evidence that secularization is taking place. On the other hand, if we speak about evidence that religious disengagement is not occurring, in the USA, religion appears to retain an important role in society with little evidence of religious disengagement. Christians with strong religious beliefs are active in politics, particularly the so-called, I like the way they put it, the so-called New Christian right. The New Christian right emerged in the 1970s and encouraged Americans to vote for politicians who supported their policies. They consist of the conservative and fundamentalist Christians who believe that what they see as a moral decline in American society should be opposed and that some aspect of the Bible should be taken literally. Jose Casanova, the Spanish gentleman, supports the view that disengagement is not happening everywhere. He believes that recent history shows that while there's been some decline in religious beliefs and practice in parts of Europe, there's not been the case in other parts of the world. Furthermore, Casanova argues that religion is becoming stronger and not weaker. So according to Casanova, secularization is not taking place. And remember, Jose Casanova, the third person, remember we had spoken about the definition of secularization put forward by Casanova in 2003, the first lesson that I'm referring to. So Casanova argues that religion is becoming stronger and not weaker. Public religions are becoming more important in many countries as a global force. Patterns of religious disengagement, my dear, are complex. While there's some evidence to suggest that states express a desire to be secular, there's often accompanied by a public discourse which places religion at the heart of social political debate. So, my dear, in a nutshell, if we speak about what all we covered today, we were discussing this topic, evidence for and against secularization. These were four different parameters that we chose to bring in under discussion. We spoke in terms of religious participation. We spoke in terms of religious membership, religious affiliation, and religious disengagement. We spoke about what this particular factor was, how this particular factor could show secularization, SEC, is taking place, how this particular factor could show how secularization is not taking place. And we chose to use the same pattern for all three parameters over here. I'd like to show you a couple of questions on secularization, which again might be helpful at this point. And this lesson has been pretty long in itself. Remember, this hasn't ended as yet. I want to do secularization, or I want to cover this particular topic even further. So for now, let's just have a look at a couple of questions real fast, and then I bring this to an end. Yeah, so we have a couple of questions from the year 2021 and 2022. Now, if we have a look at this question that we had in November 2022, variant A, this question over here reads, growth in support for new religious movements and new age ideas show that secular religion has lost its social significance, right? So social significance, this is what I'd mentioned a minute back. Number two, if we take this ahead, there was another question on secularization that read, secularization, religion has become less important in people's life. Evaluate this view. This is a pretty simple question. Another question that says people are less religious today than in the past. Evaluate this view. An even simpler question. Religious fundamentalism is best explained as a response to secularization, a question that demands your knowledge on secularization and fundamentalism both. Again, we have another question that says there's clear evidence that religion has lost its social significance. So remember, when we're discussing religious disengagement, this is where you'd be needing the content that we just spoke about. So the extent to which secularization has occurred has been exaggerated. So there's clear evidence that people are less religious today. Again, if I may take this ahead, Growing support for new religious movements disapproves the secularization thesis. There's little evidence to support the secularization thesis. We've discussed that earlier. Religion has just as important social significance today as in the past. So, do you see these questions on social significance of religion? Religion has lost its social significance again. So, I hope this has been helpful. I would want to keep a couple of separate sessions on discussing past paper questions on this specific topic too. And I hope this has been helpful. It was great explaining this to you. At least I felt good. Take good care of yourself. Stay happy, healthy, safe, and protected. Stay humble, spread positivity, spread smiles, and Allah Hafiz.